Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind is a timeless classic which paved the way for Studio Ghibli. It's a fantasy adventure set in a mysterious world where humans and nature just can't live with each other. There are toxic forests with plants that spread out toxic pollen which can kill humans, and also they have these creatures which are basically evolutions of bugs which are so big that they can trample through entire human villages. Our story follows Nausicaa, a princess of the Valley of the Wind, whose lifelong endeavors are to create harmony between both humans and nature, as she is someone who spent so much of her life trying to reverse the toxic effects of the forest, and also she's one who tries to save the life of any insect she comes across. Unfortunately, many of the remaining humans fail to share this same level of sympathy, not for each other, and especially not for nature. It's here that Nausicaa is thrown into the midst of conflict as the Tolmekian Empire steals an ominous ancient weapon and crash lands outside of their kingdom as they attempt to completely destroy their forest and anyone who stands in their way. This is a movie which shines brightly thanks to its incredible atmosphere that makes each and every location feel alive. The forest and insects are stretched into the realm of fantasy, but all have their roots in reality. But a great example of this is how the movie explains how the nature has become such a toxic and unforgivable environment, and it's all due to the acts of humans many years in the past. But it's not just nature which is incredibly detailed. When looking at the cities, it's easy to see that the world is rich with history as you find areas where nature is slowly taking over. The Valley of the Wind learns to live in harmony with nature as the kingdom exists within the valley where the winds blow away any of the toxic pollen, allowing them to survive in harmony. The Tolmekians, on the other hand, have little regard for nature and have a much more advanced civilization sporting giant airships and massive weapons. Everything was crafted with such a high level of detail. A great example of this is how everything in the Valley of the Wind was crafted from many of the items that we can find around it, such as cast-off ohm shells, while the Tolmekian Empire, on the other hand, has technology which looks much more industrial by comparison. Out of everything, there was one design that left the biggest impact on me, and no, it wasn't that Nausicaa's hat made her look like the Turn A Gundam, but it was the beauty of Nausicaa's glider. It felt very natural, almost even organic, as it carved through the sky and turned while the wings would flex, and it was just a beautiful piece of engineering, and I often wondered where she got it and what it was made from, because everything else in the Valley of Wind appears to be so primitive by comparison. This was a movie that featured strong anti-war and environmentalist themes. However, outside of the character of Nausicaa, I felt that many of the other characters felt short of what I would expect in a 2-hour-long movie. That's not to say I disliked any of the characters, though. I felt they had potential. Lord Yupa was a wandering wise man who also happens to be a total badass in combat. He's highly revered by everyone, but we learned little about him. Also, Princess Kushana was another character that we could have learned a bit more about, as considering that she hints on about injuries she suffered thanks to the creatures of nature, which give her motive for her endeavors. When watching this movie, it's easy to get the impression that good and evil is just so black and white, because we have Nausicaa, who stands for everything that is good. She stands for preserving the life of humans, for preserving the life of the insects, and living in harmony with nature. But then on the other hand, we have Princess Kushana, which is kind of against all of that, and I think the movie would have worked better if it played on the gray areas and showing that Kushana was only trying to do the right thing, and show some of her backstory and how it's a bit more complicated than it seems, and not everything is just black and white. When looking at the environment, it is easy to see they spent a lot of time crafting a vast world for this story to be told in, and that is a great thing, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this movie was leaving something out, and I was right. It turns out that Nausicaa was an adaptation of a manga also created by Miyazaki after realizing that he wouldn't receive funding for an anime movie unless it was an adaptation of a pre-existing manga. So what he did was he went ahead and created the manga before the movie, and also just so happened to shoot himself in the foot, because what he did was create a 7-volume long manga story which contains so much detail and so much story that he could never properly adapt it into a 2-hour long movie. Now, even though I haven't completed the Nausicaa manga yet, it's easy to see just by reading the first few chapters that a lot has been changed. It feels as if they took a few major plot points and simplified everything in between, ending up with a story that is somewhat different, because there are some differences, such as when we read the manga, we can see that there are detailed maps of the entire world showing places that were never seen within the movie. And also on top of that, there's this bit within the first few chapters where it shows Nausicaa having this type of aura, and then the plane crash scene was completely different as well. Having said that, I'm not knocking the movie at all. It's still something that I heavily recommend for every anime fan out there. It's a great movie, but it's just a shame that we weren't able to get a 100% true adaptation. Speaking of adaptations, Nausicaa has a bit of a dark and regrettable past when it comes to these adaptations, namely one which came to the States. It was licensed and dubbed in the 80s, and it was re-edited and retitled Warriors of the Wind, and this caused such a huge backlash that it caused Miyazaki to lay down the law and say that no one could ever edit any of his films when they license it, and rightfully so, because I don't think we have the right to edit and change anything around of somebody else's work. Unfortunately, we saw a lot of this when it came to anime coming to the West in the 80s and 90s. There were many shows that were edited, and I'm glad that this was a practice left in the past. So just out of curiosity, I decided to sit down and try out this Warriors of the Wind. I was planning on making a follow-up video to this, but I really didn't think it was that big of an issue, because the movie is practically the same. They took out some of the minor bits, they switched the placement of some of the other minor bits, and the movie is essentially the same. However, some of the minor bits that they altered do mess with the continuity and also some of the characterization, but at the end of the day, the movies still tell basically the same story. And I just feel like Miyazaki was personally insulted by the fact that somebody would take his movie and rearrange it like that, and I don't blame him for that. I stand by that, because we shouldn't be changing around the works of somebody else. We should keep it as it was intended and just pass it on through there. But either way, it's not really that big of a deal, because we don't have to worry about this anymore. Disney made a new dub in 2005, and it was great. It has an all-star cast of characters, voice actors. We have Patrick Stewart and Uma Thurman, amongst many others. Overall, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind is a timeless piece of anime history, and I recommend all anime fans to go ahead and watch this movie. And if you are still really enjoying Nausicaa at the end, and if you're somebody who's already seen the movie and loves Nausicaa, then I highly recommend that you go ahead and check out that manga. Have you seen Nausicaa or read the manga? Let me know your thoughts about that in the comments section below. Be sure to subscribe for more anime videos every week, and if you like what you see, playlists are linked in the description. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.